The road to success is rarely a straight line. It's full of twists and turns, detours, redirections, hills and valleys. So join us on the path to success as we explore people's personal journeys. Come be encouraged, informed, and empowered to reach your dreams. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Path to Success podcast. And I'm excited today about my guest. My guest is a national headliner and award-winning photographer, Brian Price. Brian, hello and welcome.
Greetings, Boris, and thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Guys, we're going to experience Brian's journey as a photographer from, where he started in college to photography photos that are going around the world, right? Brian is going global. So with that, Brian, I like to say, let's take us back to where did you start, from a photography standpoint, and probably, take us, where did you start?
That's hard to say, but I started when I was, believe it or not, like 8 or 9 or 10. But it was kind of, I didn't really know that's where I really started, because what happened was my family greeted another family into town who were the Sears, and the Sears father's name was Art Sears Jr., and Art Sears Jr. was a writer for Ebony magazine. So we used to go over to the house, and I'd be there with they had like, I think 6 children, and we're all blended in together. And one day he brought over his colleague, Monita Sleet Jr., who was the staff photographer and Pulitzer Prize winner for Ebony magazine. And, we greeted him and said hello. Again, I was young, 10, 11, 12. I said hello. I saw the camera, and, I wanted to play with the kids. So that was my first introduction of photography. And then as I moved up into high school, there was another gentleman by the name of Old Man. We called him Urban Georges. He still lives in Florida. I still call him a mentor. He's like 85 now. But he introduced me into the darkroom and pictures and doing a lot of street photography and photojournalism. And then when I got to Howard, I remembered Sleet, and I would always look at his photographs in the Ebony. And then there's one magazine came through the desk, was him in Miami. They had some protests in Miami, and I said, Sleet, this photograph is off the chain. Can I come in and see you? I wrote him a letter.
Wow. He
wrote me back 2 weeks later and said, come in. I mean, he was, big time. So, right. And I'll get back to a Sleet story if I had time for that. But, and those were the days that you can write a photo editor or call a photo editor or a photographer who worked at a major publication on a Monday, and you can come in on Friday with your book. Right. Nowadays, it's like, if they don't know you, you can keep calling all you want. You're not going to get in. So those are very good days back a few years ago. I won't say when, when you could do that. So
now you're at Howard. How did you go from Howard to kind of your first professional photography job?
Well, it's interesting because Howard was unique. They had a school newspaper called the Hilltop, and I was interested in working for the Hilltop. And I eventually, before I graduated, became the photo editor. And they paid you, a couple $100 every pay period. Back then in the 80s, I said it, that was a lot of money. But that's where I picked up my photojournalism career. And being in DC and Washington is just nothing but photojournalism going around. You got all the major media corporations, all the embassies, everything going on. So one day we were covering the Black Caucus, the Congressional Black Caucus, and Andrew Young was there, Ambassador Young, and he was reflecting on something in his life, and he broke down and cried, and I happened to get a picture of it. And tapping on my shoulder was Herb Denton. Herb Denton was a writer for the Washington Post, and believe it or not, Herb Denton got a lot of the Black writers their job at the Washington Post. They all go back to Herb Denton. So he said to me, he introduced myself, could you send a picture into the Post? I said, okay, how do I do that? And he told me what to do. I called up the editor, who was Matt Lewis, who was also another Pulitzer Prize winning photographer. He was a Black photographer, and he was a photo editor at the Post. And he said, yeah, come on in, we'll look at it. Went home, and said, okay, we use it. We're going to send you a check for $1.75. And the next day, on a Sunday, my picture appeared. They call it Apple II of Andrew Young crying. Apple II is the second page on A4. And lo and behold, when I got to photo class, my teacher was like, "What were you doing last weekend?" You know, he was scratching his head. How'd you get that picture? He was like, "What are you doing?" So I felt really good. I knew my path was where it was going. And I just kept that beat from there. And Howard really launched my career in photojournalism. And for the 3 or 4 years there, I did freelance with the Washington Post.
So 3 or 4 years you're working with the Washington Post, you're doing work there. So now where does that take you after that?
Of course, I graduated a few years after that. And then I ended up back in Jersey, where I'm from. I'm from Plainfield, New Jersey, which is interesting because Plainfield has 2 world-renowned photographers, Irvin Penn
Wow.
and Margaret Burke White. And Margaret Burke White, you'll know her work from the food. Back in the 1930s, when they were doing all the tumbleweeds out west, I forgot what it's called, the Farm Security Agency, FSSA. And Irvin Penn did a lot of portraits with Vogue and all the huge magazines. So they're both from my hometown. So they're like my hometown heroes. And I came back to work for the Trenton Times. I worked part-time with them, and then ended up with that portfolio, that body work, ended up sending it to the News Journal in Wilmington, Delaware, which is a small paper, but it had a ton of mentor photographers who worked for National. At least 4 of them went from Wilmington, Delaware to National Geographic.
Wow.
That's how big that the photo staff was with talent years ago. And then in the early 2000s, I left the News Journal and went to work for the AP, staff photographer AP in Trenton, New Jersey, for about 5 years. And there I did a lot of work. I was a photo embed for the first Gulf War. I was about to go to Tajikistan. I was on the second rotation. My colleague down in Richmond was on the first rotation, so it was 6 weeks. So okay, I'm getting ready. I went to training class, learned how to hold the M16, learn how to listen, see all the bullets would fly. We did the whole week of training as an embed. So coming up on the 5th week, there was rumors that it was going to be over in like a week or so, and I was ready to go on the Kitty Hawk, which was the ship my colleague was stationed on. I said, okay, I texted him, I'm ready to come. I'm going to relieve you. He said he couldn't wait. I had no idea why he couldn't wait I was coming, but he told me the whole story. But as soon as that 6 weeks came up, the U.S. pulled out of that first war, whatever it was. But that was still exciting to be in embed and still to travel.
So at AP, right, is that you started, at least did you start covering things nationally, or was your work now presented nationally?
It was what was interesting, my first assignment, I'll never forget this. And whoever's listening to this, if a young photojournalist, you might gonna flip out, but my first assignment, it was myself, the New York Times, the Star Ledger, 3 big wigs up here in this area, and a photographer in New York Times was Dith Pran, another mentor of mine. Now Dith, Boris, you may not know Dith Pran, but you know his story from The Killing Fields. Have you heard of The Killing Fields?
Yes, the movie.
Yeah, so he was the fixer interpreter for the writer for the New York Times.
Wow.
So this was actually Dith Pran, who was in Cambodia and left and came out. He was a photographer with the New York Times, and we became good buddies. He always had a rule that, what you shoot, I shoot, because we can't shoot different stuff, because you come back with something different, and the editors want to know, well, how come you don't have this? How come you don't have that? So you go over there, I got to go over there. So Diff taught me a lot about photography, and that was just our inside joke. But yeah, so one of my first assignments was a big assignment, and all the assignments with AP were, of course, we cover locally for the local members. Like you live in Jackson, I'm not sure. I think was the Asbury Park Press. Whoever your coverage is, we get pictures there. But a lot of our stuff went national and international. And I covered a lot of the boxing. I covered a lot of sports, the Giants and the basketball and some baseball. Sometimes AP was very territorial, so we didn't do New York a lot unless they need help. And one of the biggest assignments I had was the 9/11. They told me to get to the helicopter to go up after the crash had taken place, but the U.S. had locked down airspace, so I never got to get up. But I did go out one of the first photos from Jersey. We did. It was interesting to get the first photos out, so that ran very, very well.
That's great. So now after AP, I understand you end up in New York doing freelance work. Is that correct?
Yes, I started doing freelance and doing more of my own photography business. I'm in love with photojournalism or documentary or street photography, however you want to call it. I ended up doing some freelance work for the New York Post, the New York Times, New York Daily News, a couple of magazines, and because they all knew me from my reputation working for AP, so I worked with them a number of years, and in 2012, 2013, somewhere around there, I did more of my own, with other publications, more business as the photojournalism is. You can make a living, but it can be tough. So you have to be able to know when to switch gears.
Sure.
So I started doing more corporate work, more commercial work, but I kept my own type of photojournalism style in it. And
so that was a quick jaunt, really a run through, probably about 2 decades of work. So my question from you, from an equipment and technology standpoint, right? What were you using then? What are you using now with the whole digital age technology? What has that journey experience been like for you?
Well, when I first started off, of course, it's film. And it's interesting, I'm gonna go back to AP. Some of you all may not know this, but you ever heard of 1 Hour Photo, the 1 Hour Photo app? So we had those in the back of our car. Yes, we did. We had the chemicals, we had the heater, we had the tanks. So we're on assignment shooting jobs. If we start at 10 o'clock, we have to have pictures in by 6 or 7. So that means we got to finish shooting by 4. If we're out in the field in a remote location, you got to dip and dunk. You got to move. I'm using my hands on how we used to do it, but you take the film out, you put it on the reel, you put it in the canister, you make sure the temperature's right, and you dry it with a hair dryer and stuff like that. And it could be even at a sporting event. We did all this stuff. And then we had scanners then. This is like pre-digital or semi-digital, where we had film scanners. So we get the film and we scan it in, and we we had little laptops, and that's how we got it out back then. That was late 80s to mid 90s. We did that, and then around 1990, let's say 1998. 1995, they started working with the digital cameras, which were $40,000. But by the time I came on to AP, to the Associated Press, we had digital cameras, and it was a Canon. Now, my career started off with a Leica camera. I used it very shortly because I couldn't figure it out. It's very technical. And then I went to Nikon for a number of years, and then I switched from Nikon to Canon. I was a Canon user for 20 years. And recently, we'll get into that, I'm back to Leica now. But when I started AP, we had digital cameras, and we would just file our images from the road or wherever we were, because we're always in the office. You come in the office for a budget meeting and talk about stuff for the day, and then you're out shooting for the day. And now I still have my house of blogs. I had one client that always just wanted film, just wanted transparency. So I just let them be happy with that. They just wanted to have the film. But
so wait, when's the last time have you shot in film recently?
I haven't shot in over maybe 2 years.
Okay.
I haven't worked for the client in a while, but he wanted film. He wanted 2.25 film. I said, okay, that's what we're gonna do. But I don't have my darkroom set up, but I would go and develop it. But the last couple of years, I would just send it out to the shop, and they would develop it, and I would scan it in and send it to them.
So now you brought us from the technology to current day. Let's talk a little bit about your work current day and the stuff that's going global. I know you've done a lot of work with the Black Lives Matter movement. So well, you know what? Let's do this. Let me bring up 1 or 2 pictures that I know have gone global with your current work, and let's talk through that. So let me go here and bring those things up on the screen. And I have the screen here. So for those people who are on our audio, Spotify and Apple podcasts, I actually have a picture here that Bryant took, and it is at a Black Lives Matter protest. There's a black gentleman who has an American flag that has Black Lives Matter, and it's gigantic, and he is hugging a white police officer at the Black Lives Matter protest event. Brian, talk to a little bit about this photo. You're shooting it and it going global.
It was so interesting. So this is in June sometime. I have to look at the date, but the black man, you can't see his face. His name is Joe Brown. They call him General Joe Brown. The interesting thing about this photograph is that it took me a couple of weeks to get there because the demonstrators, they got to know who you are. You know, they got to see you regularly out there.
So there's a trust that you're building with the demonstrating community.
There's a huge trust. And my first day out there, I introduced myself, say I'm Brian Branch Price. I'm a photographer contracting with Zuma Press. My pictures go all over. And I need to get your name, information, blah, blah, blah. And I show them my press ID because what's happening is a lot of the demonstrations are being followed and watched by police and certain authorities. So they don't know who to trust or what to say. So it takes a minute or two for them to familiarize yourself and to see your work and see where you're going and stuff like that.
And they're making sure you're not police or law enforcement surveillance.
Because they call you out. They've called people out. Here goes Popo. There he is. And sure enough, there's a detective or someone that's in the crowd that they know that's there. And they have spotters. They train people that have spotters for that. Sure. Because they get followed home, they get on lists and blah, 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 and things of that sort. But this fella here, Joe, said, hey, come here. I want to do something. I want to show you something. He called me. Said, come here. I want to show you. I want to show you something. So he went over to this New York City police officer. I forgot the attachment he's in. And he went over to shake his hand. But the police officer didn't shake his hand. He reached out to hug him.
Wow.
And I dropped my camera almost. I said, what is going on here? So now he's leading a lot of protests. He's on a bike patrol. He's blocking. He's confronting the police. He's yelling at the police. He's fussing at the police. There's a lot of things you can do as a protester without being illegal or without not getting arrested. You couldn't get up with 2 inches of a New York City police officer and speak in his face.
No,
but you can't put your hands on him. Once you do that, then you cross the line. So I've been following for the past couple of weeks, and then he says to me, "Oh, this fella helped me out one day, and I want to thank him for that." So that's what that was about. Now, I get back home. I didn't bring my laptop because these protests, Boris, I don't know if you know about it, go all day long. They march all over the place from 1 o'clock to 9 o'clock. They go all day long. So I'm thinking it's going to be like my history of protest is just a few hours. Everybody goes home, but it's not here with the BLM in 2020 throughout the country. So I go home. Well, actually, what happened was I run out of digital cards. I don't know more digital cards. I took a digital card out. I had 2 digital cards in my camera. I took one out thinking it was my backup with nothing on it. So I put it in a primary slot, not knowing that I was shooting over top of this image. I get home. I said, well, wait a minute. Where's the image? I can't find it. And of course, now I'm using all kind of photo explicatives, trying to find out where his picture is. I'm panicking and crying. I got the only picture. I got to find it. So I end up getting Rescue Pro, which I have, but you got to subscribe every year. I didn't subscribe this past year. So I spent $30 to get a subscription. And man, alive, did they find those files. They recovered those files, and I was like, oh my goodness. Because I called the desk and said, I got this hot picture. I'm going to send it in. It's so hot, you got to see it. And sure enough, it saved about 5 frames of this only photo. I had more frames, but it only recovered like 5 of them. And this is like 2. I had two to choose from, and I sent this one in, and I think they used this one.
That's great.
So that's how that picture came about. It's all about having the trust in the community, and things happen when you're out there. You run out of film, you run out of batteries, things happen. So.
Life. So I got one more, Brian. I'd like to talk about it before we wrap up here. And
Okay.
this picture for our audio audience, right, Spotify and Apple Podcasts,
Yes.
it's a picture of a nurse in her scrubs and her uniform jacket, sitting with it looks like other healthcare professionals back there, and their fists are raised, multicultural. This is and she has a sign that says Black Lives Matter. Brian, tell us about this picture.
Yeah, I'd be glad to tell you about this. I brought my good luck charm with me, I should say. My son, Monita Kai. I said, son, you want to go to the marches with me? He said, yeah. So we went up. There were, I would say, 3 or 4 actions. They call it actions, they call them actions. 3 or 4 that day. So
Sure.
we were way uptown on York Street, Upper East Side by Gracie Mansion, and we were shooting a protest up there. And then I'm looking on my app and my buzzer and said, oh, they got something going on Times Square. So we went on down to Times Square, and this was the first George Floyd protest with healthcare workers. They decided to give him a memorial celebration for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. It was quiet and silent. So they all took one knee, raised their hand, and memorialized George Floyd. So I didn't really know what was going on until I got there and took the photographs and found out after why they were doing that, because they were also working on their COVID issues.
Right.
They came out from the hotels and nearby hospitals to Times Square to meet to recognize the killing of George Floyd. And this one ran around the world as well. I don't know the publications ran in, but it ran like all over.
Well, Brian, as we come close to wrapping up this time together, right, and just experiencing your career, technology changes, to where your pictures, went from AP national to now things going global. What would you say to other young photographers, artists, creatives? What would be kind of your advice to them, regarding just path to success in their dreams?
As a photojournalist and a portrait photographer, that's my 2 things that I like to do. I love taking portraits, and I love photojournalism or reportage. They may call it documentary or street photography. All kind of photojournalism falls in the same thing. I would say a couple of things is study the craft, study the art, find out who you like. Why do you like to shoot what you like to shoot? And come up with your own style. It may take you a day or 2, a week, a year, or 3 or 4 to come up with your own style. And you'll notice how your work is improved, how people want to call you up and book you and things of that sort. So my main thing is, if you're really into photojournalism, know about telling a story, knowing about the facts and how things create in front of you. Having the right tools. I'm gonna get to that in a second, but my main thing is come up with study people. Like when I worked at the Hilltop at Howard University, I used to look at the Washington Post, and after a period of time, I can go through the paper and see who shot what without knowing who was who. I could, oh, that was so and so, that was so and so, and sure enough, the credit is on the bottom. Not because that's their beat, because I can know their style, and that's what I want to. And that's what you should be able to pick up as you go through publications. You say, oh, that's this person's style, that person's style.
And just, Brian, before you go on, one of the things that we've been hearing in probably the last 2 or 3 years is being your authentic self, right? Really celebrating your uniqueness. And then when I hear you say your style, right? Your uniqueness, your authentic self.
Yeah, that's key. And, you're out there in the field, you're creating an image. That image is part of you. Is that image authentic or is it not authentic? And you have to ask yourself that. How did you come to that? So you have to think about why you're photographing this person, or I'm talking photojournalism and what their story is all about. And you know what the story is about. You know that they've done this, or why they're doing this, and how can you make them in the best light that reflects you? So you always have to think about, right, your authentic self, how you portray that. How can I know that, that's your photograph and you made that that person now is going to be recognized by tons and tons of people. And, you want to make them look the best they can, if that's the case. but lately, I told you this earlier, sports before it came live, is that I've moved back to Leica camera. Here's my Leica over here. I have to show you two. It's a total black and white digital camera. And when I first started doing photography, it was black and white. I love black and white. I realized through this time period from when I started to now is that black and white is my first love, true love. And you can do well with, but there are a lot of clients who just want only black and white. I mean, I do clients that want color, and they pay the bill, so I give them color. But my true self is black and white. So people say, why do you shoot black? I love black and white. It's just a texture that you come up with. And the Leica camera I use, I'll be real brief, I have two Leica systems. They're both mirrorless. One's a SLR, one's like a DSLR, and one's a rangefinder. DSLR I use for more high-end stuff. I have to shoot action sports and things like this. But my rangefinder is specifically for documentary. It's the rangefinder again. It's the Leica M10 monochrome with the 35 1.4 in there. I specifically use that for covering the BLM pictures. Some were in color, some were black and white because the clients wanted color. So I did some conversions. But as a rangefinder, which can be difficult to operate, but you got to learn it. It comes with a manual, but you don't understand the manual, so you got to shoot it. You got to do tests and trials. But that's what I shoot primarily now. I have two Leica M cameras that I use. I use the 24 millimeter and 35 primarily when I'm out shooting photo J or street photography.
Well, Brian, I would like to say thank you for spending this time sharing your journey, your path to success with our audience here. Also want to say I am looking forward to the upcoming book, especially from your Black Lives Matter photography work.
Yes, we expect that to be ready by February. Thank you so much. I'll set you in touch, and I'll put a link up on my site in the next week or so. We should be wrapping it up by the end of December or middle of January.
Right. And again, Brian Branch Price Photography.
.com, yes.
.com. BrianBranchPrice.com. And that will have been on the video. Yes. Well, thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Have a great holiday season. Brian, thank you again.
God bless you, and thank you so much, Boris.